Some roller coasters keep the same name through their entire lifespan, but when a coaster is given a new name, it could be for a number of different reasons. Maybe the park decided to retheme it. Maybe they just gave it a full makeover and the old name just doesn't fit. Maybe it was given new trains, or new track, or maybe new ownership led them to change it due to branding. Whatever their reason, some name changes can be pretty good, while others just aren't quite as good. Let's take a look at both sides of this. Welcome to Ejector Airtime, and these are my top 10 best and worst roller coaster name changes. Before we get into this, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content, and don't forget to hit that like button, as it really helps against the YouTube algorithm. Let's begin with a few honorable mentions, name changes that aren't amazing, but aren't necessarily the best or worst. When California's Great America decided to remove the stand-up trains from their B&M coaster Vortex, they decided to give the ride a makeover as well. The track was repainted blue and given the name Patriot. This isn't a terrible name, but this name and logo have already been given to another coaster in the Cedar Fair chain, Worlds of Fun's B&M Invert Patriot. It's kind of like Great America decided to take the Six Flags route rather than pick a more creative name. Medusa at Six Flags Great Adventure has been through more than one name change. After opening as Medusa in 1999, the coaster was rethemed to the Superman villain Bizarro 10 years later. It was also given a few new features such as fire effects and onboard audio, but in 2021, it returned to the Medusa name with a really nice new paint scheme. Finally, another one that's been through multiple name changes is Big Apple Coaster at the New York Hotel in Las Vegas. This Togo looping coaster originally opened with a pretty decent name in Manhattan Express, but in 2007, they decided to just call it the roller coaster. If it still held this name, it would easily land near the top of the worst names list, but in 2015, they returned to a much more fitting name. Starting off the worst names list at number 10 is Joker at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. This RMC hybrid opened as a GCI wooden coaster called Roar, but when the park decided to give it the RMC treatment, they chose to give it a new name, similar to the other hybrids up to that point. But what a lazy way of going about it. This took place around the same time that Six Flags was filling their other parks with SNS 40 free spin coasters, most of which were also named Joker. Of course, we all know Six Flags isn't exactly the most creative with their coaster names, but they could have done so much better with this one. Starting off the better names list at number 10 is Backlot Stunt Coaster. Originally called Italian Job Stunt Track and located at Kings Island, Kings Dominion, and Canada's Wonderland, this trio of Premier Rides launch coasters were added back when the parks were owned and operated by the Paramount Movie Company. When the parks were sold to Cedar Fair, all references to the Italian Job movie were removed. When a coaster that's heavily themed around a movie and features special effects to fit that theme, giving that coaster a more generic name can be a challenge. But I think Cedar Fair didn't do too bad with this one. It's not too long, and it's straight to the point. Number 9. Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens, Tampa. The original Gwazi name was one of my personal favorite coaster names. It comes from a fabled creature which featured the head of a tiger and the body of a lion, which the two sides of this GCI dueling coaster were named after. But when RMC came along to transform it into a massive hybrid coaster, Busch Gardens simply went the Six Flags route by taking the original name and placing iron in front of it. They also gave it trains that resemble a crocodile, which has nothing to do with the original Gwazi theme. It just doesn't fit or make sense. Busch Gardens, come on. You have so many creative coaster names in your park, you should have kept that going. Number 9. Whizzer at Six Flags Great America. When this coaster opened with the park in 1976, it was called Willard's Whizzer, deriving its name from Willard Marriott, the founder of the Marriott Company, which originally founded the park. When I first came across the original name of this coaster, it was a bit of a tongue twister for me. It may be a very basic name and not such a huge change, but with so many other coasters with really long names out there, sometimes simplicity can make a big difference. Number 8. Pandemonium at various Six Flags parks. Now this is a name I don't really mind, but the reason it makes this list is because I liked the previous name so much better. These Gerslauber spinning coasters can be found all over the place and they all provide a great thrill. And when Six Flags originally opened them in their parks, they were all named after a pretty big name in both sports and video games. Tony Hawk's Big Spin. I myself grew up on the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games, so I love this name. These coasters also featured cars that resembled skateboards and had a ramp during the layout, so I was really bummed to see this theme removed. Number 8. Phantom's Revenge at Kennywood. Originally opening as Steel Phantom, this aero coaster featured a massive drop of 225 feet and a top speed of 80 miles per hour. Early on, this coaster gained a reputation of being quite rough, and its forward inversions were being taken way too fast, so when Morgan stepped in to revamp the coaster by removing the inversions, adding many airtime moments, and extending the largest drop, the name was also changed. And just like the rest of the coaster, the name Phantom's Revenge just seems like a real solid improvement. Number 7. New Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas. Now this is about as bland as it gets. When Six Flags gave RMC their first project by replacing the wood track on the Texas Giant, an aging wooden coaster, the park simply decided to call it the new Texas Giant going forward. That was back in 2010. It's now 2023, and I just don't think calling it the new Texas Giant really works anymore. Number 7. Riddler Revenge at Six Flags New England. Six Flags may not be the most creative with their coaster names, but in some rare instances, it does end up working out. Mind Eraser had long been the name of choice for many of the operating Vekoma SLCs, and it's very fitting when it features those bulky restraints that many riders bang their heads on. But when Six Flags New England gave this one new trains, as well as a nice new green and yellow paint job, the Riddler name definitely works here. It's also not too far away from the park's Batman-themed coaster. Number 6. Flight Deck at Canada's Wonderland and California's Great America. While still under the Paramount name, both of these coasters featured theming to the movie Top Gun. Of course, when Cedar Fair took over, the Top Gun theming had to go, and both were given a very generic name. This name just doesn't make any sense. Why would you theme a coaster to the flat landing strip on top of an aircraft carrier? Number 6. The Bat at Kings Island. Now this is another Top Gun coaster that was also given the name Flight Deck for a little while as well, but luckily Kings Island decided not to keep it as long. In 2014, the park decided to change it to the Bat and give it a nice new paint job. This was done to pay tribute to the original aero-suspended coaster, which operated sporadically in the early 80s. And with so few suspended coasters left in operation, this name was a great idea, as it's a nice tribute to a long-gone park classic. Number 5. The Big One at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. When this Aero Hypercoaster opened in 1994, it featured a sponsorship with the beverage Pepsi Max and carried the name Pepsi Max Big One all the way to the end of the 2011 season. I don't know exactly what it was about this name, but I always loved when the Pepsi Max name was attached to this coaster. Simply calling it the Big One is another one of those names that just comes off as slightly dull and boring to me. Number 5. Pepsi Orange Streak at Nickelodeon Universe. Moving on to another coaster with the Pepsi name, this one opened in the Mall of America with the name Pepsi Ripsaw. The park was then themed to the Peanuts characters and had a very strong outdoor theme, almost like you were in the middle of the woods, so the Ripsaw name was fitting. Years later, when the park was later themed to Nickelodeon Universe, the Pepsi sponsorship with the coaster stayed, but it was given new coaster trains that were bright orange. Not only did I like this improvement, but there was something about the Orange Streak name that I came to like very quickly. Number 4. Racer 75 at King's Dominion. Following the success of Racer at Kings Island, a set of similar racing wooden coasters were built at both King's Dominion and Carowinds. King's Dominions opened in 1975 as Rebel Yell, and when I hear this name, my mind immediately goes to the Billy Idol song of the same name. But the name changed to Racer 75 in 2018, with the 75 referring to the coaster's opening year. Similar to how I still refer to Chicago's Willis Tower as the Sears Tower, I still call this one by its original name, as I just like how it sounds way better. Number 4. Reptilian in the same park. After carrying the name Avalanche for many years, this bobsled coaster got a big makeover for the 2022 season. This was to have it fit in better with the new Jungle Expedition area of the park. Being in the same area as Arrow's Looper Anaconda and the new S&S Free Spin Tumbili, it fits in a lot better. The new paint job and the snake design on the train also gives it a great look. Number 3. Superman the Ride at Six Flags New England. When this Intamin hypercoaster opened in 2000, it was originally called Superman Ride of Steel. While this wasn't the best name ever, it fit well as it was a play on Superman being the Man of Steel. And following a brief period of carrying a Bizarro theming, the Superman name was brought back, but not in the same way. Simply putting the ride at the end of the coaster's name is just lazy. I honestly don't know who in their right mind would believe that anybody walking up to this coaster wouldn't know that this is in fact a ride. Number 3. Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. Here's another example of an old wooden coaster being given the RMC treatment, but unlike Six Flags, who just slaps the word new, iron, wicked, or twisted in front of the original name, Cedar Fair actually got creative with their naming. I initially wasn't a fan of this name, but then I saw the backstory that they were giving the coaster, and Steel Vengeance just made sense. And it honestly helped to build up the excitement for this coaster. Number 2. Rougarou, also at Cedar Point. America's Roller Coaster was the first park that decided to take their stand-up coaster, which had been declining in ridership, to give it floorless sit-down trains. But rather than keep the awesome-sounding name and the eye-popping red, yellow, and blue color scheme, they decided to give it an entirely new theme. Rougarou stands as a name that not only doesn't sound as cool, but I just didn't get it. Apparently, it's a mythical werewolf of French folklore, but I feel like the general public visiting Cedar Point probably had no idea what that was. Number 2. Galactica at Alton Towers. Originally opening with the more generic name Air, this was the first flying coaster to open from B&M, and in a park that can't build above the tree line, this had to be a challenging coaster to build. In 2016, the park decided to make some modifications to the coaster. This included giving it the more exciting name of Galactica. It may not be themed to Battlestar Galactica, but at least it sounds more creative. Number 1. Gotham City Gauntlet Escape from Arkham Asylum at Six Flags New England. Wow, that's way too long. This Wild Mouse coaster originally opened as Roadrunner Express, and I personally think they should have just stuck with that. This isn't that highly themed of a coaster like Hagrid's at Islands of Adventure, so in this situation, less is definitely more. I mean really, who's going to refer to this coaster by that full name? Number 1. Afterburn at Carowinds. While the other Cedar Fair parks were re-theming their Top Gun coasters to Flight Deck, Carowinds decided to be more creative and gave their B&M invert a way more fitting name. Unlike Flight Deck, this name actually makes more sense. On a fighter jet, the afterburner is a component that allows the jet to increase thrust for supersonic flight, much more inviting than a name simply referring to the landing strip. That's going to do it for this video. Let me know in the comments what your most and least favorite coaster name changes were. Also, I'm gearing up for a trip to Kings Island at the end of May, so be sure to subscribe if you want to see videos from that adventure, and maybe I'll even see you there. Thank you so much for watching.